I'm in this game because I'm a psychiatrist and I want to help patients, but also I'm in it because of the intellectual challenge. When you meet for the first time people with schizophrenia, they express views, beliefs, ideas, attitudes that you really don't come across mainly in daily life. These are complicated disorders. Other illnesses, they can benefit from confirming diagnosis by taking blood tests, doing x-rays, something objective. In psychiatry we have to rely just upon symptoms, clinical pictures. But we have known for many years, decades, that a substantial contribution to psychiatric disorders, and schizophrenia in particular, is genetic. Recently, with my colleagues, we identified a whole number of new mutations in people with schizophrenia. Now, new mutations are those where a DNA change has happened in the person with the disease that is not present in either parent, so they haven't inherited the DNA in the traditional way. By doing this study, we probably got one of the first glimpses at a pathophysiological mechanism for schizophrenia. I'm deeply honoured that the work that we've been doing has been recognised by this award. I mean, it's great. I'm thrilled by this. I suppose what would be most important, really, is answering a question in schizophrenia research that has a direct benefit for patients.
I've been interested in psychiatric research really since I was a medical student. It seemed to me then, and it does now, that this is one of the great challenges facing modern medicine. The genetics of schizophrenia has really been transformed over the past 5 years. 5 years ago, we knew that the disorder is genetic. Now we have a wealth of evidence telling us that really disorders like schizophrenia, the genetic component is very complex. It involves many genes, hundreds of different genes probably. What we want out of this work is to start to get a handle on the biology. What are the genes telling us about schizophrenia? And I think we're starting to get enough data that we can do that. And this is really very exciting and is, I think, beginning to tell us where in the brain we should look. And it's actually where in cells we should look. We feel that by discovering the genes, if you like, we're priming this next stage of development, and so that we hope that in the future people will benefit through having new treatments. Well, it's a great honour to receive the Lieber Prize. I've been really delighted by it. Having the approval of your peers, of other distinguished scientists who's saying that they admire your work, is the best compliment that you can get in science. The question I'd most like to get the answer to over the next 5 years or so is really the extent to which schizophrenia is caused. I think there's going to be a lot more to come from genetics. We've only just got the tip of the iceberg.
I was fortunate to get a NARSAD Young Investigator Award in 2009, and it was really crucial in my development and I think in the emerging research findings that we're discovering. The most valuable thing at the moment I've been able to do is identify what is one of the largest samples of those with severe schizophrenia in the world, and I think that's starting to lead to new findings. We've spent a lot of time in the last 3 or 4 years collecting clinical samples, so recruiting and interviewing people with schizophrenia to find out more about the condition, with the ultimate aim then of linking genetic findings with these kind of symptom level findings. What I hope is that with new and emerging findings we'll explain more of the genetics of schizophrenia, and that will help us identify the pathways that go awry in the brain of those that subsequently develop the condition. If we can identify those pathways, then we can also look at the effects that those pathways going awry has on cognition and other symptoms, and that means that we may be able to have treatments specific to symptoms. I think in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we won't be treating schizophrenia as a diagnosis in and of itself. We'll be treating spectrum of symptoms, and I think this research and the research approach, which I think I've followed and continue to follow, should help inform those kind of treatment developments.
Memory is personal and it's evocative, and it's related to nostalgia and history, and it's a fundamental part of who we are. It's harder to think of anything much more exciting than studying the nervous system and the brain and how it works. What I'm interested in is systems neuroscience. The parts of the brain that we study are prominently the hippocampus, area of the brain that's vulnerable to damage and chronic depression. So if we've made some small contribution to all this, it's in understanding something about how this system works, how this structure works, and what memory is. What we do primarily to get at that is to study patients who, because of an injury or disease, they've had damage to particular parts of the brain. The fundamental thing is that we know that memory is not a single faculty of the mind. Memory is composed of many different abilities that are supported by different brain systems. As one looks over the course of the history of the problem, we've come an enormous distance from not even knowing where these structures were, or not even understanding what memory really is, to having a sense of how to think about memory. We know a lot about the details of how these parts of the brain work, but on the other hand, we're really just at the beginning. We're always faced with the challenges of trying to understand an issue, trying to understand a problem. All of us who do basic science, I think, have the belief that what we're doing has the potential in eventually finding applications for health and disease.
In my personal experience, what usually turns a researcher on is that curiosity and the joy of discovering. Finding a problem that is just so interesting that you're going to dedicate years, if not decades, to solving that problem. I run the program in neurogenetics at UCLA and the Center for Autism Research. The essence of the work that we're doing is we use modern technology and tools to understand the causes of neuropsychiatric diseases such as autism so that we can then treat them. There are a few things that I'm most proud of in terms of discoveries. One is defining the molecular neuropathology in the autism brain, that is, the changes at the gene level that are occurring in the autism brain. The second is the ability to make a genetically engineered mouse and study it and show that it has autistic features. We can actually begin to treat social abnormalities caused by genes that predispose to autism in humans. We're in this time of extraordinary promise where we have the most extraordinary tools we've ever had. So funding is critical to push this forward. I really think we're on the precipice in a very positive way of really a totally new neuropsychiatry. The Brain and Behavior Research Foundation is really critical in neuropsychiatric research. These kinds of awards and the kind of funding, especially to young investigators, is really remarkably important. When I started working in autism, I never imagined that we'd have the amount of progress that we have now. It gives me hope that we can even do more.
The most exciting thing is when you have the eureka moment in the lab, you find the gene, you understand something new that hasn't been seen before. Those moments are priceless. I'm a child psychiatrist and a human geneticist. I see patients and I run a laboratory that is focused on identifying the causes of autism, Tourette syndrome, and other childhood neurodevelopmental disorders. As I started taking care of kids with serious psychiatric illness, it became clear how little we knew about these complex disorders. And the disorders are very complex. They've been very frustrating because of the level of complexity of the brain. The idea from the start as a clinician was to use genetics as a window into the biology of the disorders, and we're finally, I think, making significant progress. What we're trying to do is specifically to identify genes that contribute to these disorders. So if we can understand the genetics, we may be able to understand brain development. If we understand brain development, we might begin to understand the complex interplay of environment and experience with genetics. And it gives us some concrete ability to treat kids who are severely affected in the near term. Investing in research is tremendously important. It helps people know that there's a path forward. It helps get the best and the brightest. The Brain and Behavior Research Foundation is invaluable in the field. This is our lifeblood. Without grant support, we don't move forward. We don't have labs. So they keep our research going. They bring new people into the field. They replenish the field. Having this kind of award recognize commitment to science and to science in child psychiatry is really a wonderful thing and tremendously helpful.